You want to know about the house in Midland? The one out on the old county road? Yeah, I can tell you about that. I'm still not sure I should, but I can. My name is Jake, and I used to be a foreman for a pipeline crew. That house was supposed to be my fresh start after the divorce. It was a cheap rental, a single-wide mobile home sitting on a couple of acres of nothing but caliche dust and mesquite. Landlord was a guy named Mr. Henderson who lived in town. He showed me around. It was plain, but it was mine. Big living room, a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a spare room I used for storage. First week was quiet, just the sound of the wind rattling the skirting and the occasional oil pump jack in the distance, thumping away like a metal heartbeat. Then the pots started. I'd be watching TV after work, and I'd hear a loud clang from the kitchen. I'd go in, and a pot would be on the floor. I figured it was a mouse or something, knocked it off the counter. I'd pick it up and go back to the TV. Next night, it was the silverware drawer. I was in the bedroom getting ready for bed, and I heard this terrible rattling, like someone had grabbed a handful of forks and spoons and just shook them as hard as they could. I walked out, and the drawer was open a crack. That was it. It was annoying, you know? Not scary, just one more stupid thing to deal with after a long day. The second week, it got worse. I was eating dinner at the little folding table I had. A salt shaker just slid across the table from one end to the other and fell right off the edge. I sat there with a mouthful of beans just staring. Okay, that wasn't a mouse. I told myself the place was old, the floor wasn't level. I was making excuses, but my heart was beating a little faster. That's when I started noticing the cold. It wasn't the whole house, it was spots. You'd walk through a doorway and it would feel like you walked through a curtain of ice water. You'd be standing in the living room and the air around you would just go dead cold for a few seconds. It didn't last, but it was enough to make the hair on your arms stand up. The worst was the spare room. I never went in there much, just had some boxes and an old recliner I never got around to fixing. But I started hearing things from in there at night. Not loud bangs, but a low, heavy kind of dragging sound, like someone was slowly pulling something heavy across the floor. I'd get up, heart pounding, and open the door. Nothing. Boxes were still stacked, the recliner was empty, but the air in that room was always the coldest. I finally called Mr. Henderson, told him the place was making noises, that something was off. He got quiet on the phone for a second, then just said, "Probably just the wind, son, or the pipes. This weather plays tricks." He didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. Then came the night it all fell apart. I was in bed, almost asleep. The house was dead quiet, not even the wind. Then, from the spare room, I heard it. A deep, slow thump. Then another. Thump. Thump. Like footsteps. But they were too slow. Too heavy. It sounded like a giant was walking in my spare room. The thumping moved to the wall. Thump. The whole wall shook. A picture I had hanging in the hall fell off and the glass shattered. I was frozen. I couldn't move. The thumping got faster, more frantic. Thump, 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 thump. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I finally got the courage to get up. I grabbed a tire iron from under my bed. I crept down the hall, my feet crunching on the broken glass. The door to the spare room was shut. I put my hand on the knob. It was ice cold. I pushed it open. The room was a mess. Boxes were overturned. The stuffing was ripped out of the old recliner and scattered everywhere. And in the middle of all that mess, on the floor, was a photograph. It was old, faded. It was a family. A man, a woman, and a little boy, maybe 5 years old. They were standing in front of this very mobile home, but the man's face had been scratched out,
scratched so hard there was a hole in the photo. I heard a noise behind me, a low, wet, gurgling breath. I turned around. There was nothing there. Nothing I could see, but I could feel it. A massive weight of anger and sadness pushing down on me. The air got so cold I could see my breath, and then I wasn't in the hall anymore. It was like a movie played in my head, but I was in it. I was seeing through the eyes of that little boy. I was small. My father was huge, drunk, his face twisted with rage. I was hiding in the spare room, in that very recliner. I heard my mother scream. I heard a crash, then heavy, slow footsteps. Thump, thump. They were coming for me. I felt the terror, the real, absolute terror of a child who knows he's about to die. And then, nothing. Just blackness. I snapped back to my own body, on my knees in the hall, gasping for air. I knew with a certainty that sat in my bones what had happened in that house. The father had killed them, the mother, and then the boy. And his anger, his evil, it was stuck there. It was the weight I'd been feeling. I ran. I just ran out the front door, got in my truck, and drove all the way to a motel in Odessa. I didn't go back. I called Mr. Henderson the next day from a payphone. I told him I was leaving, that he could keep my deposit. He didn't ask why. He just sighed and said, "I was hoping it would be different this time." That was 5 years ago. I still have nightmares about those heavy footsteps, about the weight of that thing pushing down on me. But what gets me, what really gets me, is that photo. I didn't pick it up. I never touched it. But when I woke up this morning, here in my new apartment in San Antonio, it was sitting on my nightstand, the one with the father's face scratched out. And for the first time, I looked at the little boy's face, and I realized, with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather, that he had my eyes.
I never believed in any of this stuff. My name's Mike, and I'm a contractor. I build houses. I don't get spooked by them. So when my wife, Sarah, said her sister Claire needed a place to stay for a few months, I didn't think twice. Claire was going through a rough divorce, needed to get out of her apartment, find some peace and quiet. We had a basement we'd finished years ago. A bedroom, small living area, even a little bathroom. It was perfect. Claire moved in with just a few suitcases. She was quiet, kept to herself, which was fine by us. She worked nights as a nurse at the county hospital, so our schedules barely crossed. The only thing I really noticed was that she seemed tired, worn out. I figured it was the divorce and the night shifts. The first weird thing happened about 2 weeks in. I was upstairs, couldn't sleep, watching some old movie on TV. It was past 2 a.m. From downstairs, I heard a sound, muffled but clear. It was music, a kid's music box kind of tune, all tinkly and wrong. I got up, went to the basement door, and listened. It stopped. I opened the door. It was dark down there and quiet. I figured Claire must have some old alarm clock or her phone doing something weird. Went back to bed. Next morning, I asked her about it. She looked at me with these big, dark circles under her eyes. "I don't have a music box, Mike," she said, her voice flat. "I heard it too. Thought it was you." That was the start. After that, it was little things. Sarah said she'd go down to do laundry and find all of Claire's clothes moved from the hamper to the floor. I'd go down to fix a drippy faucet in the basement bathroom, and the cabinet doors under the sink would be wide open. I'd close them, turn my back, and hear them creak open again. It was annoying more than anything. I told Sarah it was an old house, settling, drafts. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Claire got quieter. She stopped eating dinner with us on her nights off. She'd just stay in her room. I tried to talk to her once, ask if she was okay. She just stared at the floor and said, "It's hard to sleep down there, Mike. Something's always moving." I thought she was losing it, the divorce, the stress. I suggested she see someone, the therapist. She just shook her head and went back downstairs. Then the TV started turning on by itself. The one in the basement. It was an old one we had down there, not even hooked up to cable, just for DVDs. But at night, we'd hear it. Static. Just loud, hissing static. The first time, I went down there and the screen was just snow. That bright, buzzing static filling the room. I unplugged the TV. The next night, it was on again, even though it was unplugged. That's when I started to get a bad feeling. Not fear exactly, more like a deep, heavy unease, like you're being watched from a dark corner. The breaking point was a Thursday night. Sarah was out with friends. I was in the living room reading. From the basement, I heard a crash. A big one, like a dresser falling over. I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and ran to the basement door. I yanked it open and flipped on the light. The stairs went down to the main rec room. Everything looked normal. I called out, "Claire, you okay?" Silence. I walked slowly down. The air got cooler with every step. At the bottom, I looked around. The couch was fine. The little kitchenette was fine. But the door to Claire's bedroom was open. I never saw that door open. She always kept it shut. I walked over. "Claire?" I pushed the door gently. The room was destroyed. The mattress was flipped off the bed frame. The lamp was smashed on the floor. Her clothes were ripped out of the tiny closet and thrown everywhere. And in the middle of it all, sitting on the floor, was Claire. She was just sitting there, knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. She wasn't crying, she was just staring at the wall, her lips moving but no sound coming out. Then I saw them, on the wall, dozens of them, little handprints, the size of a small child's hand. They were pressed into the paint, like they were pushed from the other side. The paint wasn't just dirty, it was actually pushed in like the drywall was dented. "Claire, what happened?" I whispered. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were wide but empty. "It's a boy," she said, her voice a dry rasp. "He's looking for his mom. He's been waiting. He thinks I'm her." I felt the temperature drop. It was like someone opened a freezer door right behind me, and then I heard it. The tinkly music box tune, coming from right beside me. I spun around, nothing there, but the music was loud, clear, and getting faster. It sounded wrong, like a record speeding up. The rocking chair in the corner, the one we'd had for years, started to move. It creaked back and forth all by itself, faster and faster. Claire started to scream. Not a loud scream, but a low, gurgling, choking scream. She grabbed at her own throat. I ran to her, tried to pull her hands away. Her skin was ice cold. I could see red marks appearing on her neck like invisible fingers were pressing into her skin. "Get off her!" I yelled. I didn't know who I was yelling at. I just swung my arm where I thought it was. My fist hit nothing but air, but I felt something. A jolt like an electric shock went up my arm. The music stopped. The rocking chair stopped. Claire fell forward, gasping for air, crying. I helped her up and we ran up those stairs so fast. We didn't stop. We drove to Sarah's friend's house, picked her up, and told her everything. We took Claire to a hotel that night. She never went back to that house. None of us did. We sold the place, took a huge loss on it. The real estate agent said it sold fast to a young couple with a little boy. I wanted to warn them. I tried to find them, but the sale was private. A few months later, I was at the hardware store and I ran into a guy I knew who did landscaping. He mentioned he was working on a job over on our old street. I asked about the house. He shook his head. "Weird place," he said. "The new people are already moving out. The wife looked terrible. Said her little boy kept waking up crying, saying an old lady was living in his closet, watching him." I just nodded and walked away. It wasn't an old lady. It was a boy waiting for his mom. And he was still there. But now he wasn't alone. He had Claire's anger to feed on, and he was getting stronger. I still hear that music box sometimes, in the quiet moments just before I fall asleep. It's faint, but it's there, waiting. My name's David, and I'm a bartender over on 6th Street. I've lived in Austin for about 10 years now, so I've seen all kinds of weird stuff, but nothing prepared me for that apartment on Manor Road. It was a ground floor unit in an old complex built in the 70s. Nothing fancy, but it was cheap and close to work. The manager was this older guy named Frank who smelled like cigarettes and gave me the keys without even walking me to the door. "Unit's been empty a few months," he said. "Previous tenant left in a hurry. You'll need the paint, probably." I didn't think much of it. People leave apartments all the time. I moved my stuff in, a couch, a bed, some kitchen stuff, and my guitar. First few nights were fine. I'd work late, come home around 3 a.m., crash, and do it all over again. Then the banging started. Not loud at first, just a single knock somewhere in the walls. I figured it was neighbors or pipes. All buildings make noise. But it got more regular. Every night around the same time, 2:47 a.m., I'd hear 3 knocks, always 3. I'd be laying in bed and I'd hear them coming from the living room wall. I'd get up, check, nothing there. Go back to bed. 3 knocks again. I asked my neighbor across the hall, a girl named Melissa who worked at a coffee shop. She got real quiet when I asked. "Oh, you're in 1B?" she said. "Yeah, we hear it sometimes too. Comes through the walls. Frank says it's just the building settling." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked past me, down the hall toward my door. The knocking got louder, more aggressive. One night I was watching TV and it sounded like someone was pounding on the wall right behind the TV with their fist. I jumped up, pulled the couch away from the wall. Nothing. But when I put my ear to the drywall, I heard something. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing coming from inside the wall. I called Frank the next day, told him something was wrong with the place. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Look, I'll be honest with you. The last guy, name was Tommy, he had some problems, mental stuff. He'd call me late at night, say people were in his walls. I'd come check, nobody there. Happened for months. Then one day, he just vanished, left all his stuff. Cops came, looked around, nothing. Case went cold. I should have moved out right then, but I'm stubborn and broke. I figured Tommy was crazy, and whatever he had, it was gone with him. I was wrong. The knocking turned into scratching. At night, from inside the bedroom closet, I'd hear scratching, like fingernails on wood. I'd open the closet, nothing but my clothes. I started sleeping with the lights on. I'm a grown man, 32 years old, and I was scared to close my eyes in my own apartment. One night, I came home from work around 3:30 a.m. I was tired, a little drunk. I opened the door and flipped the light switch. Nothing. Power was out. I stood there in the dark, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The apartment was dead quiet. Too quiet. No traffic from outside, no hum from the refrigerator. Then I heard it. A whisper. It came from the bedroom, just a single word drawn out long and low. "Davy." I froze. My name. It said my name. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked toward the bedroom. The door was open. I shined the light inside. The closet door was open too, and on the floor of the closet, written in what looked like dust or ashes, was a word: leave. I ran straight to Frank's office, pounded on his door until he answered in his bathrobe, told him everything. He let me crash on his couch that night. The next day, he went with me to get my stuff. We walked in, and everything was fine. Power was on. The closet was clean. No writing on the floor. Frank looked at me like I was crazy, but he didn't say it. I moved out that week, found a new place south of the river, tried to forget about it. A month later, I was at work, pouring drinks, when a guy sits at the bar.
Older guy, rough-looking, with these dead eyes. He orders a whiskey, drinks it fast, orders another. I make small talk, ask him how his night's going. He looks at me and says, "You used to live on Manor Road, didn't you? Unit 1B? I stopped pouring. How'd you know that? He stared at me for a long time. Then he said, "My name's Tommy. I used to live there before you." My blood went cold. They said you disappeared. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't disappear. I ran, same as you. That thing in the walls, it's not a ghost. It's something else. It learns, it watches, and it doesn't like being alone. I didn't know what to say. He finished his drink, put a 20 on the bar, and stood up. At the door, he turned back. "You hear knocking at night still? 3 knocks?" I nodded. He nodded back. "That means it's found you again. Good luck, man." He walked out. I never saw him again. But he was right. I still hear the knocks. Not every night, but sometimes. Always 3. And last week, I woke up and found the door to my bedroom closet wide open. I know I closed it. I always close it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants. But I know one thing for sure. It followed me. And now I'm wondering if Tommy is in a new apartment somewhere, hearing the same knocks, or if maybe one day I'll be the one who vanishes and some other guy will move into my place and the knocking will start all over again for him.
My name's Carl, and I'm a high school history teacher over in El Paso. Been married to my wife Diane for 12 years. We got 2 kids, Ben, who's 9, and Emma, who's 6. We live in a nice little house in a development on the east side, the kind with a pool in the backyard and neighbors who wave when you pull in the driveway. This whole thing started with a birthday. Ben turned 9 in October, and Diane's mom, God rest her soul, always sent the kids money for their birthdays. She passed 2 years ago, but she'd set up these little savings accounts for them. So for Ben's birthday, we decided to let him pick something special, something he really wanted. We took him to that antique mall up on Montana Avenue. You know the place, big warehouse full of old junk from dead people's houses. Ben ran off toward the toy section while Diane looked at old dishes. I wandered around looking at old tools and signs. That's when I heard Ben yell, "Dad, look at this!" I walked over. He was standing in front of a booth full of old games and dolls, and in his hands, he was holding a wooden box. It was about the size of a shoebox, dark wood with some kind of design carved into the lid. Looked like a tree, maybe, or a bunch of branches all twisted together. "It's a puzzle box," the old lady running the booth said. She was tiny with white hair and these real pale blue eyes. "From Germany, I think, early 1900s. You slide the panels to open it." Ben was already trying. He slid a piece of wood on the side. It clicked. Then another. Click. He was focused, determined. After about a minute, the lid popped open. Inside was nothing, just an empty velvet lining. "It's broken," Ben said, disappointed. The old lady just stared at him. Then she looked at me. "Sometimes the empty ones are the most full," she said. Weird thing to say. I paid her $20 just to get Ben out of there. Ben loved that box. He kept it on his nightstand, wouldn't let Emma touch it. For the first week, nothing happened. Then Diane mentioned something at breakfast. "Ben's been talking in his sleep," she said. "Last night I went to check on him and he was carrying on a whole conversation. Sounded like he was talking to someone." I laughed it off. Kids do that. But it kept happening. Every night Ben would talk in his sleep. Not just mumbling, but full sentences. Diane recorded it on her phone one night to show me. I listened. Ben's voice, but different, lower, saying things like, "I remember the snow. I remember the horses." Ben's never been in snow. He's never been on a horse. That's when the other stuff started. Little things at first. Emma's dolls would be moved from her room to the hallway. The TV would turn on in the middle of the night to static.
The dog, an old lab named Duke, started refusing to go near Ben's room. He'd just stand in the hallway and growl, low and mean. I talked to Ben about it, sat on his bed, asked if anything weird was happening. He looked at me with those big brown eyes and said, "I got a new friend, Dad. His name is Heinrich. He used to live in the snow. He shows me things at night." My blood ran cold. "Where is Heinrich now, buddy?" Ben pointed at the wooden box on his nightstand. "In there, but he wants to come out. He says it's cold in there. He wants to be warm like me." I took the box. I threw it in the trash can outside. I told Ben it was gone, that Heinrich had to go back where he came from. Ben just nodded, but he had this little smile on his face that I didn't like. The next morning, the box was back on his nightstand. I asked Diane if she got it out of the trash. She said no. I asked Ben. He said Heinrich brought it back. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with a baseball bat, listening. Around 2 a.m., I heard Ben's door open. I got up and looked down the hall. Ben was standing there in his pajamas, facing the wall. Just standing there, perfectly still. "Ben?" I whispered. He turned his head toward me, but his eyes were wrong. They were open too wide, and in the dim light they looked pale, almost white. "He doesn't like you, Dad," Ben said. But it wasn't Ben's voice. It was deeper, older, with an accent I couldn't place. "He says you threw him away. He says you're mean." I ran to him, grabbed him, carried him back to bed. He was stiff as a board, cold to the touch. I laid him down and sat with him until morning. He woke up confused, asked why I was in his room. I told Diane everything. We decided to get rid of the box for good. I drove out to the desert past the Franklin Mountains, found a dry arroyo and threw the box as far as I could into the scrub. I watched it tumble down into the dirt. I drove home feeling lighter.
That night, we put the kids to bed together, kissed them both goodnight, went to our room, fell asleep holding hands. I woke up to screaming. Emma's scream. I ran to her room. She was sitting up in bed, pointing at the corner. "The man, Daddy! The man in the corner!" I flipped on the light. Nothing there. Just her toys, her dresser, her closet door slightly open. I hugged her, told her it was just a dream. Then I heard Ben's door open. I walked to his room. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, holding the wooden box. It was covered in dust and dirt. "It came back, Dad," he said calmly. "He said Heinrich said you can't throw him away. He said he lives here now, with us." I grabbed the box. I was ready to smash it, burn it, do whatever it took. But when I lifted it, it felt different, heavier. Something rattled inside, something that wasn't there before. I slid the panels. Click, click, click. The lid popped open. Inside, on the velvet lining, was an old black and white photograph. A man in old-fashioned clothes, standing in the snow next to a horse. His face was blurry, but his eyes were clear. Pale blue eyes, just like the old lady at the antique mall. I heard a creak behind me. I turned. Ben was standing there, but he wasn't Ben anymore. His face was wrong. Older. His eyes were pale blue. "Thank you for letting me in, Papa," he said with Heinrich's voice. "I was cold for so long. Now I'm warm." I dropped the box. It hit the floor and the lid slammed shut. When I looked up, Ben was just Ben again, crying, asking why I was scaring him. I held him, told him it was okay. But it's not okay. That was 3 months ago. Ben is different now. He has conversations with himself in German, a language he never learned. He draws pictures of snow and horses, and sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking, his eyes flicker. For just a second, they turn pale blue. The box is gone.
I burned it in the backyard, but it doesn't matter. Whatever was in it, it's not in the box anymore. It's in my son. And I don't know how to get it out.